Hello, my friends. Welcome to Postscript. And the sun is setting here in Berkeley Springs, and so you see some lights on ahead. That's from the sun. So we'll deal with that as we go forward here. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about the media and how the media works. Now, remember, as we've said in the past, there are these two big tracks that are emerging going forward. One of them is one based upon control. One is about freedom. And the freedom one is about human development and emergence and awakening and all those kinds of things and sovereignty. And the track over here is about using technology to essentially control and increasingly control people and control what they think and what they do and how they behave. And that's essentially what we've got set up here right now. Now, as I've said before, it's almost impossible to know anything for sure. Everything that again, 99% of what we experience in our life, or what we think about in our life, is all mediated through some of the things, through other people, the through the internet, through the media, whatever it turns out to be, because you can only see what's right around you, right, and experience what's right around you. There's some real, we won't spend some time here talking about it so much, but there's even questions about whether the reality that you see around you is influencing you, and if it's, you know, absolutely real or not. Anyway, it's because in the end, it's all about electrical signals in your brain, which all can be, I'm an electrical engineer. You can engineer that stuff. You can make you think, you can put thoughts in your mind. You can make you think things and see things and all kinds of stuff. And so in the end, it's even questionable whether there is anything that isn't contrived and produced from inside of your consciousness. But that's not what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about the media, because the other stuff on the outside, but everything you know about what's going on, I don't know, down in town or in Washington or, whatever the capital of your country is or whatever, is all, you're dependent upon the media. And you don't know anything that isn't brought to you by the media. And if the media is not accurate and there isn't integrity in the process, then then you're being misled, and you don't know for sure. Now the problem is particularly acute because, as you may or may not know, is after the Second World War there was all of these young people, young men mostly, who had out of Ivy League schools, who had been part of the OSS, which is the predecessor to the CIA. And when they got out of the military, when they were released after the war, what then became the CIA, what they did is they had a program that was called Project Mockingbird, and it was an active, focused attempt to try to take these young people who had been in the intelligence business during the Second World War and put them into leadership positions within each of the major media things, so CBS and RCA and NBC and whatever it turned out to be back then, the New York Times, Washington Post, and so on. And so, and the objective was, of course, to be able to control the news that was available to you. Now, if you're not familiar with this, you might think that this is kind of far-fetched and they really didn't do this well, or that it didn't happen very much. But William Colby, who was the director of Central Intelligence back in the early 70s, who, after he got out of that business, was a friend of mine. Bill Colby is rather famous among other things, at the church committee hearings Senator Frank Church back in the early 70s went after the CIA for all the kind of things that they were doing, going after taking down governments. And if you know anything about MK Ultra, it's only because of the Church committee hearings. But Frank Church, back there in '71 or so, pointedly said to Bill Colby, who was sitting across on the witness stand, does the CIA have paid representatives that are associated with the major media? And Colby said, yes, we do. And he said, well, how many of them are there? And he says, well, there are at least 800. And the Church says, well, what do they do for you? And Bill said, well, they control what stories, that we can kill stories that are otherwise that we don't want to be in the press, or we can promote stories that we want to be in the press. And so there was this clear exposure of the fact that the intelligence communities had a systematic, organized, focused effort to control the press. And at that time, supposedly, it was outside of their focus was supposed to be outside of the United States, and they couldn't be inside the state. Now, some of the best guesses since then, from things that I read, say that there are thousands, not 800, but thousands of people who are on the payroll of the CIA that are embedded in media organizations, in every major kind of media organization around the world. And that, in fact, that they have long kind of tentacles everywhere and are able to kind of systematically influence what you read and what is presented to the American people now, as well as everybody in the foreign press, in order to manipulate it so that it represents what they want kind of communicated. I saw a piece this morning from Paul Craig Roberts, who was saying maybe the only honest media in the world is the Russian media, because we haven't been able to get our guys inside of it to affect them, and there's a level of objectivity or openness, and they report on things that nobody else reports on, because there's clear kind of effort to control all of that. Now, the system has gotten really quite acute, and there's well-established kind of information to say that the CIA was involved in the funding of Google and Facebook and any of a number of those Twitter, and that in fact they used them certainly to gather data and information about everybody, and so that they track behavior of individuals and other such things. But it also works the other way in their ability to kind of promote certain things and to try to influence elections and such, and the general behavior and the understanding of American citizens. You could make the case, and many have, that in the last election was significantly influenced through the mechanisms that are available to the CIA, through the New York Times and the Washington Post and Foreign Policy magazine, and you can just go over the whole kind of thing. I mean, if you are aware of this and then you start to critically kind of look at what happens, you can watch how a particular story or an idea is planted in, and it suddenly immediately proliferates and shows up almost using the same kind of words across television and the internet and whatever, all when they're trying to drive a particular kind of idea. And I mention all of this only in light of what we talked about on a previous segment, and that is that if you're going into this period of this space where the world is all changing, and you want to build a new world, and it's uh, and you want the degree of independence and sovereignty and so on, what you've got to realize is that not only does the government not tell you the truth, and it's legal for them not to tell you the truth, but it is particularly the case in terms of the intelligence community and to some degree. I think it's becoming more so with the military than it used to be. I mean, there was a time back when I was in the military when there was a higher, what seems to me at least, is a higher degree of integrity in the senior leadership than it seems to be now, and that they are trying to promote what would be good for the military. I mean, it's only natural what would be good for the military in the end, rather than what's good for the United States and for American citizens. And so you gotta keep that in mind when you go through this, because you don't know anything for sure. The only things you know are kind of mediated through all of these other sources, and there has been a significant and very successful attempt to essentially build control over most of the major sources that we all use, and to give us input about what's happening in other places in the world and why it's happening and so on. And which is why you need to kind of get out of the dependency on that and start to look for alternative sources that have not yet been infiltrated, if you will, by the intel community. So thanks for being with us. If you are new and you'd like to hear more about these kinds of things, just click on the link below and leave your email. We won't sell it or anything, but it's the only way we have to be able to let you know about upcoming segments and what we'll talk about next time. So thanks so much, and take care.